as I was saying, so in the 8th and the 9th stanzas, long before dawn, with those towers drawing in worth and name to their full height, an opposite was forming, a four still years and miles off. With those towers drawing in worth and name to their full height, that suggests that we're talking going back into the past, in the fact that when the Twin Towers were built, they were actually the tallest buildings in the world. And I think what Armitage is saying here is that as they were becoming more important and drawing in status and increasing in status, and another part of the world, another idea was forming, and an idea that the West was somehow evil, that was the new Satan, and that those Twin Towers were symbolic of that evil, the evil of Western capitalism, if you like. And so as the Twin Towers grew in stature and status, so this opposite thought of the evils of that status were forming in the Middle East. And then he talks about moving headlong forward, set locked on a collision course. So again, what we can do is we can link it back to Hardy's poem, The Convergence of the Twain, in that you have two very opposite forces who come into collision with one another, and one is there's only one who's going to be the winner. In fact, really, when you look at the Twin Towers, nobody really won. It was a lose-lose situation for all. Then we go into stanza 10. Then time and space contracted, so whatever distance held those worlds apart thinned to an instant. So we had a meeting of East and West, and a dissolving of the boundaries between East and West. All of a sudden, these two worlds, which were miles and miles apart, literally collided with devastating consequences. During which cameras framed moments of grace before the furious contact wherein earth and heaven fuse. Again, you could debate Armitage's use of language. In fact, in many ways, you could debate the whole poem, because it's very, very hard to write a poem about something so awful. And I wonder whether his attempt, how successful his attempt has been here. It's not one of my favourite poems in this anthology. I find it slightly forced, slightly laboured, and I think this ending, for me, suggests that. Framed moments of grace. Well, what are those moments of grace? I'm assuming it's the movement of the aeroplane towards the Twin Towers, which did, in some respects, have an element of grace before they collided, and earth and heaven fused. So we have in many ways, a fairly straightforward poem, and it's kind of a clearly direct response to Thomas Hardy's poem, The Convergence of the Twain. And whereas we had the Titanic and the meeting, the iceberg, and the Titanic coming down, in some respects what we have is the West meeting the iceberg of the East. And I think what Armitage is doing here is he's trying to compare this sort of fundamentalist Islam to an iceberg. How successful he is, jury's out for me. But as a response to a very famous poem, it does have its merits. What I'll do in the next podcast is I'll go through in a little bit more detail, looking at some of the images in the poem.